Hello to those of you who have arrived early. We will wait to start on time. I see there are people arriving still. I hope you've got your questions ready. Okay, we'll start in just a moment. So for those of you who are already here, and I can see quite a few people there, and I can see numbers. So as we mentioned in the promotion of this webinar, it is a confidential webinar. So I will receive a list of the people who have joined today, names and email addresses, just as you did with your registration. However, nobody knows you're here. Um, when you ask questions today in the Q&A panel, preferably, um, I won't be sharing names. I will simply be talking about the question itself and then providing you with my responses. So I encourage you to please put forward anything that's on your mind about this whole topic of navigating complex workplaces. And pop your questions in the Q&A box. You'll see with Zoom, there's a little Q&A down the bottom with a question mark. There's also a chat box as well. So I've got both open on two screens. So if you see me flicking from screen to screen, that's what I'm doing, not reading the newspaper. Okay, so let's start off. This session is meant to be really interactive. The fact that you've turned up today means you've got something on your mind. You're curious about something about your workplace dynamics. Are you experiencing bully? Maybe somebody's called you a bully. Maybe you want to be able to navigate relationships differently. And that's what this session is all about. It's not a presentation. So you're only going to get to see my face. Sorry about that. There won't be any facts and figures presented. It is simply about you and what you're most curious about. So I encourage you to start popping your questions in the Q&A box and also the chat box as we go through this. And I can see the first few questions are coming through already. So thank you very much. The reason I'm running this session is because I have quite a number of clients who are navigating difficult scenarios right now. Um, it's not to say that this is a unique bubble, but there are definitely plenty of situations that people are finding difficult to navigate. Um, they're not sure whether what they're experiencing is bullying or whether they simply haven't quite got um, the skills to navigate things, to be much more aware of what the room is all about. And so we're going to cover off all of those things. I also went to speak on a panel recently for women in finance, and it was quite eye-opening with the crowd that was there. It was a decent sized group of people. And when I was responding to one of the questions about workplace bullying, I said it never starts out as bullying. Often there are little indicators that things aren't quite right. So there might be a miscommunication. You might be left off a meeting invite that you should have been included in. There's no explanation. You notice that people aren't engaging with you in the same way anymore, and it's leaving you feeling like you've got questions and not enough answers. And a pattern emerges in terms of behavior. And then often what happens is people find themselves in their corner, um, not sure how to um, change the dynamic, what to do to make things better for everybody else around them as well as for themselves. And that's when things become much more cemented and entrenched. And then once you've got entrenched behavior, that then will often lead to bullying. Now, I'd also like to say that sometimes people are accused of bullying and they really aren't aware that that is what they're doing. They don't have visibility of how they're being received. And without being shown how their behavior is impacting other people, for them at that time, they simply don't know that they are engaging in that way. Now, it's ideal for us in a workplace to be much more sensitive to the impact that we have. Yet, if you don't have the skills to look at what you're doing, how you're engaging, and critique your behavior and actions in a workplace, it makes it really hard for you to self-reflect. So hopefully today you'll get some tips on that as well, because that's really key for it. I don't think there are many people out there who intend to be real bullies. I just think that they're unaware of the impact of their behavior and also don't have the skills and capability yet to manage situations that have complexities to them. So let's start looking at these questions that are coming through. And the first one is, how can you tell the difference between workplace bullying and a manager who is simply being demanding? Yes, it's a very good question. So recently I had a client who came to me and said, look, I'm experiencing this situation where the manager is just giving me a hard time all the time. And I feel like the goalposts are changing each day. They say they want certain things from me, and then they come to me with a different set of boundaries or requests for the next day. And it goes on day after day after day. And I feel really, really unsure about my work environment. So that feels like, a manager that, sorry, more questions are coming through. I'm trying to find my spot on the list. That sounds to me like a manager who's being demanding and not really thinking about their impact on the person, and also in doing that are not reflecting on the fact that they're changing the goalposts regularly. So if it's bullying, it will be escalating and demonstrating behaviors like contempt. When somebody rolls their eyes or they start to huff and puff, they might start to call you names. They might demean you and tell you you're a bit on the useless side. Um, they're not careful with the way they engage. They might openly embarrass you in a team meeting, uh, exclude you from meetings that you should be involved with without explanation or discussion. So they leave you without the context. And cumulatively, when you've got a whole lot of those incidents happening, that ends up invariably being a case of bullying, especially if it has an impact on you where you feel incredibly vulnerable and you find yourself seeking out help elsewhere. So you might go to your GP and explain what's going on. You might end up needing to take some kind of medication. You might be seeking out your employee assistance program for some support. You might be seeking out counseling. You might find yourself finding it very difficult to get to work. And that is the impact of a series and culmination of behaviors that create a situation of bullying, mocking you. Now, if a manager is being demanding, they might keep asking you to do things and deliver things. And it might feel unreasonable to you. And really, there are antidotes to this. So, what I would say for you to do, if you've got a demanding manager, slow down the discussion. So they come to you with a question or they come to you with a task, and the next day it feels like the gateposts have changed. Start to do things like in the discussion, say, look, my understanding of what you've just asked me to do is this, X, Y, Z. Am I on the right track? I just want to make sure that we're aligned and don't want to assume I understand without clarifying. You can also start that conversation off with, is it okay if I ask you some questions about what you've just asked me to do? My understanding is this. Am I on the right track? Would it look like this? Can I check with you once I've framed it up to see if we're aligned and start to stage gate the work so that you make sure that you're not simply delivering something to them and they go, no, you've got the wrong end of the stick here. And so then if they come to you the next day or a couple of days later and they go, no, 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 this is wrong, you go, oh, okay. So I just want to check, has anything changed since the last time we spoke about this work? My understanding from the discussion when we were talking about it, as you requested that, we discussed what that means, and this is what I have done. So I'm just wondering what has changed since then. And that allows you the opportunity to safely challenge the person, also be inquiring, do it in a way that's not confrontational to either of you. You're simply inquiring as to whether you're on the right track or not. And then you are able to get the conversation on a better level. Both of you will understand and appreciate the way you're setting up what we would call contracting the work and the conversation to make sure that you're on the same page with one another. So that would be how I would respond to that one. Another question here, the next one is, what should you do when the behavior is subtle and each incident seems too small to raise? It's that moment where there's almost like a sleight of hand and you go, oh, did I just imagine that? Did they really give somebody a look when I spoke in that meeting? Take note. Start to take note of what's going on and what your questions are of it. And of course, what the impact is on you. But most importantly, the questions you have of that. I had somebody call me yesterday who's in a bit of a pickle at work. And they explained to me a meeting that they'd been to where when they were speaking, a couple of people visibly rolled their eyes, and they did nothing about it, and neither did anybody else in the room. So that behavior was permitted. And I said to them, look, I said, next time this happens, say something along the lines of, so and so, I noticed a shift in you just then, and an expression on your face. I'm wondering if I could ask you what is going on for you right now about what I was just talking about. So you start to hold the people to account for the way they are engaging. And fortunately, in that case, the engagement was really visible, so they were able to do that. And you also get to understand what's going on for them around their response. You're bringing it into a public forum, but doing it in a very gentle way. I would definitely not encourage you to have a strong tone to your voice. You want to do what I would call is create that space for a warm, collegiate discussion, and understand from their perspective what's going on. Now, if you don't feel comfortable doing that in the meeting, as you're leaving, pull them aside for a moment and say, look, I've just got a question for you, if you don't mind. I noticed when I was talking about this, there was that expression on your face. And look, I didn't understand it at the time. I wanted to keep doing my presentation, but I would love to know what you were thinking and really understand what's going on for the other person. It also holds them to account, as I mentioned before. It's really an important thing to do. Um, if you're in a meeting and someone's starting to write notes, let's say it's one-on-one, and then there comes a natural pause, and you're going, I feel really quite uncomfortable with this person. They're taking notes. I don't know what they're taking notes about. Say, look, I've noticed you taking some notes, and I'm wondering what's standing out for you about our conversation so far. I meant, when I was mentioning X, you jotted some stuff down, and Y, you jotted some more stuff down, et cetera, et cetera. Is that what's that about? What's standing out for you? As though it's a positive, not a negative. Expect them to maybe have some reflection. And then you can have maybe a different discussion with them about what's going on. And you're not assuming in your head that you know what they are taking note of and what they're going to do with their notes. It might lead to a better outcome for you. Oh gosh, they're coming through thick and fast here. Should you confront a workplace bully directly? I would say it is a good idea to challenge and challenge safely. So if you think someone's going to really have a crack at you and flame you, then think about the way you want to have that discussion. Do you do it in a public arena, or do you do it one-on-one? When you challenge somebody you feel is bullying you, you would have been taking your notes about all of the instances of stuff. And then when you want to challenge them, I would say, look, I would really appreciate having a meeting with you to discuss our working relationship. I can, let me I'm going to put a 30-minute meeting or a 45-minute meeting in our calendars to discuss that. And then when you come to the meeting, don't go, you did this to me, you did that to me, you did this. And then on Friday night at 5 o'clock, you sent me that. That kind of stuff comes across as an accusation. And that's going to make them very, very defensive and arc them up. So, what I would suggest you do in that meeting is say, look, I've noticed that these things are happening between you and I in our engagement. I've noticed recently that I'm not being invited to meetings that I believe I ought to be included in. I've noticed recently that a couple of people have mentioned to me that you seem dissatisfied or curious about some of the work that I'm doing. I've noticed that when I speak in a meeting, you and so start typing, and it feels like you're messaging me behind my back. I don't know whether that's true or not, but it's happened on a number of occasions. So, yes, calling them out is a good idea. And then when they respond, listen and listen very carefully to what they are saying. Take notes. Um, and they might go, oh, well, I just get really frustrated because you've got that turn of phrase of to be honest or something like that. And that's really annoying for me. It's a trigger. Go, oh, okay. Tell me why that might be a trigger. I would love to know more about that. Or they might say, oh, I didn't invite you to those meetings because it's not really important for you to be there. And then you've got something to hang on to. You can say, oh, okay. So if I shouldn't be there, but my remit is the finance bit or the whatever it is, the process piece, I'm not sure. Are you doing information gathering meetings or are they about making decisions? My understanding is the purpose of those meetings is to do this. And in my role and with my responsibilities, it is in my remit to be a part of that. Maybe we talk about our roles and responsibilities right now. So you definitely want to hold the person to account and try and engage with them honestly and do it diplomatically so that you don't raise their ire too much and the same for you and that you don't put yourself into an unsafe situation. By doing this kind of thing as real time as you can, that will help you understand, but also build your confidence so that you can stand up to what's going on and you understand it in a way that you didn't do before. And then you can start to work on other techniques for corralling them. Now, if they barrel on, and they keep doing it and you've raised it with them, you've tried to talk to them on a number of occasions and you've jotted it down, then when you get to the point where you raise a concern about the workplace behavior you're experiencing from that person, you have a very clear history of what you've actually done to try to circumnavigate it. And by writing file notes, memos, whatever format you've got a really strong story. And you also won't be coming in the same damaged way that you might be to a complaint if you haven't actually said or done anything about it. That's what I would say to that. I hope that's helping. Um, okay, this one is oh wow, oh my gosh, there's heaps of questions here as I scroll down here. The next one here is to manage my workload and priorities. I sent an email on Monday outlining my current tasks, including the paper I was required to draft together with my planned completion dates. Following this, my manager assigned an additional task which presented as a straightforward, low-effort exercise. However, the task ultimately proved to be significantly more time-consuming than initially anticipated. I took a proactive approach to manage this additional work stream and keep it progressing alongside my existing commitments. I provided the first draft of the paper to my manager for review on Friday. As part of the review, a number of matters were identified that required further clarification and amendments before the paper could be finalised. Now I am blamed by my manager for not being able to complete the paper by the date that I proposed. That's a rough one. So I think in terms of the contracting of arrangements to complete this to do a piece of work. So was the date meant to be 100% complete with all queries wrapped up, or was it for the first draft? Um, and then the additional task. So I'm assuming from this that the that the tasks, including the paper that were required to draft with the planned completion dates, were probably going to fill up your time 100%. And then the additional task on top of that, you were going to put in discretionary effort to complete that alongside of it. So extra work. However, you may have found in doing that that you were really sinking because it turned out, as you say, to be greater than you expected. I strongly encourage people when you're in a workplace like that and things keep coming at you to proactively have the conversations about the extra work. So to go back to your boss, have a chat with them, say, look, what I've explained to you on the Monday is actually everything I can do this week. I'm happy to take on extra work with clearly defined timelines, yet some things will have to be wound back in terms of being able to deliver them on time. Can we talk about that? And then you negotiate what can and can't be done. So if the Friday was to have a really solid draft in a better shape that you were able to deliver it, and this new piece of work took you off somewhere else, then in real time manage the expectations around your workload. And then as soon as you realize it's greater, then recontract the arrangements and reprioritize with your manager to make sure that you're going to deliver what you can in the allotted amount of time and you both understand. As a leader, as a manager, and I can say this from my own experience, people don't like surprises. So if you've gone and said, yep, 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 I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, and then suddenly there's a surprise that's it's not delivered and there's been no conversation, that will be a frustration point. So check in, especially if you've got a aggressive timeline of 1 week in this instance, if I'm understanding the question correctly, then check in each day with progress and go, look, this is taking a bit more time, that I've got under control, etc., etc. Just want us to be on the same page. At this point, if it was, say, Tuesday and you kind of thought you could manage it, say, there's a risk it might be slightly delayed, not sure, I'll know more tomorrow. Keep them in the loop so that they're a part of what's going on. I hope that helps. Okay, what can you say in the moment when someone tries to humiliate or undermine you in a meeting? Yikes, isn't that awful? It's really awful. So, what I would say is, let's say someone says something really nasty, like, "Oh, you just don't seem to have done your work. You haven't done your homework on this," or "That was a stupid response," or "That's silly," or "You're just being silly now, aren't you?" I would, I would go, "Oh, wow," and say something like that to show your surprise, because I'm sure you'll be surprised, and then go, "Okay, let me get this straight. You're telling me that I'm stupid or I haven't understood, etc., what the remit of the work was, or etc. Am I right?" Yes. Okay. Can you explain to me what you mean by that? Give them silence and let them explain to you what they mean by that. It's the same with the eye rollers in a meeting when someone visibly eye rolls and you go, "Oh God, I've trodden on something there." That's when you go, "I noticed a change in you just then. Can I understand what that expression was that went across your face? It will help me with what I'm doing and the way we work together." And it's the same with being demeaned or humiliated in that meeting. "I noticed, you've just called me a name. I don't feel comfortable with that, but I'd like to understand what's driving you to do that." You want them to account to you and be responsible for the flame they've just thrown at you. Most often, people will kind of want to freeze and run out the door as fast as they can in a situation like that, holding the other person to account and getting to understand where they're coming from, but also getting them to justify their response through explanation is a beautiful way of getting it out in the open, and acknowledging that you know what they're up to. Another one here is, how do you document bullying without appearing obsessive or overly defensive? Yes, it's a tough one, that one, because you probably want to write down every single slight, every single thing that comes to mind, every message you've read and received, meeting notification or exclusion, every comment they put in a markup in a document, every time they've said something to you, and you should definitely do that, date and time it. That's the copy you keep for yourself. Then you pull out themes and you make mention of examples. So it's okay to say, look, let's say you put in a claim or a complaint about bullying, and you've got, say, 30 pages of notes. That includes screen grabs and all sorts of things. Then have them all and then take the themes out. You can talk about the regularity of the instances and occurrences. This happened on average X number of times per week. It showed up in Teams messages, Zoom messages, or whatever your online collab is in the organization. I received emails. I had verbal conversations where I wrote down word for word what was said to me. So these are the themes and this is what I've done about it so far. And I'm coming to you now, HR, to register my concerns because I don't feel safe because of this. And if it's been a physical thing, they get one strike. They don't get more than one go at that. But often in a professional environment, it's subtle, it's hidden, it's masked. And so you have to look for the thread, the themes. You have to hold them to account so they know that you're noticing, and then you put all of that into your package for your concerns when you raise them. That is how you go about documenting it. The great thing about that is that if it's been going on over a few months and you've sort of let it happen and you've done a few things along that period of time over a few months, is it gives you confidence that when you raise it, you've really given it a good go to resolve it, and you really have noticed what's going on. But you should definitely not be too punitive in your reporting, because it'll look like you may have a vendetta as well. So you level it up to a more senior, thematic, and productive way of doing that. Another one here is, what should you do when the bully is well regarded by senior management? Because they're very good at managing up. How often does that happen? And the senior manager doesn't notice it. And if you do talk to senior management, and I've had an instance in my history, my personal history, where I raised concerns about somebody who we both reported to. This is going back in the archive. And when I raised it, the senior manager said, "Oh, that's not my experience of them." And I went, "Oh, I knew you were going to say that." In my head, I said that. And then what I said to them is, "Well, I don't believe you would notice it because they would not be behaving like that with you." And they went, "Fair point, fair point." However, often these often people do have good relationships with senior managers. I say tackle it with the person first. And if they are the kind of person who takes your sunshine, So let's say they're the kind of person who you're working for or with, and they take your ideas, so they're an ideas thief, and they present them as their own. I always encourage people to find a way of making sure that others know that the idea originated with you. And you can say things like, oh, I'm really pleased that you found merit in that idea, because when I was thinking about it and then had a discussion with so and so and so and so and so and so about it, to help me form up my thinking towards a solution. This is why I came up with the idea. I felt that there was a gap here or a this and that. And I'm really delighted that it's been picked up. You know, if you ever want to ask any questions about it, please do. My boss is across a fair bit of the detail, but if you wanted to know what was going on and the thinking and developing, super happy to have a session with you and my boss. So make sure you claim your space, stand up for yourself, and be there in the moment, taking control and having what I would call agency. Then you align yourself, or not align yourself, because that sounds sneaky, but you use your network to your advantage. So you're able to, so let's say one of the peers of your manager or this person who's got really great relationships with senior management is you have a bit of a relationship with them. You could go to their peer and have a council meeting. And when I say counsel, I mean seek counsel from them in the situation you find yourself, and make sure they understand you are simply asking for counsel, their counsel in this situation. So, and again, actually back in my archive, I have done that where there was someone who was agitating my team and me, and trying to tread into take our responsibilities away. And so I went to the manager and I said, look, this is the situation the team and I find ourselves in. And I went to their manager, who was one up from me. So the person who was agitating was my level at the GM level. And I said, so what I'm finding is this situation has presented itself, and this person and their team are doing these kinds of things. I'm seeking your counsel in how to manage this. And they were fantastic. They gave me the counsel in terms of how they would manage it for themselves, how they thought I could manage it, etc., etc. What I did is I seeded in their mind that there might be a problem. And I actually did know that there were other people talking to this person's manager about the behaviours. Subsequently, that person was actually let go from the organisation. It's not because of the conversation I had with them, but it's because I was one of many voices. But make sure you talk to people you trust, and I did trust his manager. And if you don't trust them, go and talk to HR and ask them how they would recommend you manage the situation. Um, this is if you're doing it before you're making laying a complaint, just ask them for counsel. It's important that you have people in the organisation you can speak to before it gets to that tipping point where you have to put in a complaint. And of course, at some point, you may find yourself deciding to leave. But if you've actively managed this for yourself in the best way you can, if you do leave or you do make a complaint, you will feel much more confident and knowledgeable by dealing with it in different ways before you get to that tipping point. Because sometimes there are people you just simply can't work with. What else do we have in here? Oh, what happens when people see the bully and then do nothing? Oh my gosh. I would strongly encourage you, if you've been a bystander, to speak out um, in some way and go, oh, I'm noticing something going on here, or go and talk to the person who's demonstrating the bad behavior and go, hey, in that meeting you did this. And I actually don't think that that was that cool because this is how it came across to me. And I can only imagine what it was like for so and so. Maybe you want to go and have a chat with them and set the record straight because, um, it's just not cool. And then perhaps then you also speak to the person who was on the receiving end of it and say, look, I'm really sorry that you experienced it. I noticed it and I felt that that was inappropriate. Subsequently, I've gone and talked to them about it and suggested that you guys have a chat to clear the air. Um, so people will stand by and do nothing. Now, if you've noticed somebody stand by and do nothing and you are on the receiving end of it, I'd go to that person, the people who stood by and did nothing, and go, oh, look, what do you think of what just happened? What did you notice? And let them know how you felt about it. And say, if you're okay, I'm just going to take note that you were witness to that because I've been experiencing a fair bit of this stuff lately, and I feel very uncomfortable with it. And the fact that you were there, I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page, or that we acknowledge that you were witness to this. Puts the person on notice that they did nothing about it, but also lets them know that they were witness to it. And if push comes to shove, you're going to mention their name. And in flight, by asking them what they thought of what happened, you can then make your file notes and jot it down so that you've got it real time, because we know that eyewitness accounts are not great. The other thing I would suggest you do, and I saw a report about this recently, and I thought it was a really lovely way of acknowledging not doing something in flight. So you all may be aware that Sam Neill has recently passed away, um, which is sad. Um, However, there was a report about him being on set for a show, and one of the runners was yelled at by a producer. High tension situation. And Sam Neill took the time to get the person's mobile phone number and sent them a text later on and said, hey, it's Sam here. What happened today was not your fault. I didn't think it was appropriate that the producer yelled at you, etc., etc. You're doing a great job. Keep doing what you're doing. And so the impact that that had for that person was profound, because it acknowledged that whatever the situation was that was playing out wasn't okay. Presumably, Sam probably went and talked to his producer and said, hey, not cool. But also that person receiving that message, what a game changer moment for them to know that somebody senior felt that it was inappropriate. I would have felt really, really chuffed, but it's also humanizing it and acknowledging that maybe stuff goes on in high stress environments, that we don't always behave the way we want to. I don't know what happened after that, whether there was an apology or anything like that, but if you find yourself being on a bystander and you do nothing, it's okay to speak to the people afterwards. You don't have to do it real time. Give it some thought and then go and talk to them um, after the event, or message them. I've got a message here. I had a client who took it to HR and whistleblowing, but the company just supported the manager and ignored the bullying. Is there anything you can recommend around not getting to that tipping point where it's almost too late and leaving the company feels like the only option? And what an awful place to find yourself in. Um, and feeling like the only thing you can do is leave. And I would say always try to stand up for yourself and negotiate your exit. So if you get yourself to a point where you're exiting, and oops, I just kicked something under the desk there. Um, and the company supported the manager and ignored the bullying, you may very well have a situation on your hands where you can make a fair work claim. It may be adverse action, it may be bullying, etc. I would say go and talk to a lawyer. Before you go, though, make sure that you take note of absolutely everything that has happened and what HR have done or haven't done. Seek professional help. Come to somebody like me. I know a fair bit about this. I've worked in HR for many years in my career. Seek out legal, and I did this just recently with somebody else who's going to be exiting from an organisation, and I suggested they go and talk to an employment lawyer. I gave them my thoughts on it, and I said, I think you're now at a point where speaking to an employment lawyer is useful. You can have a singular meeting with them, and then get their legal and professional opinion. If you're going to leave and there are grounds for you to leave and the organisation has behaved badly, I honestly suggest that you try to negotiate an exit that's suitable to you. And in doing that, and again, I can't give you all of the details in this short meeting, but in doing that, think about the things that you would like to ask for. So there might be a deed of release with a non-disparagement clause. There might be all sorts of things in there around payments, structure, paying you out, receiving a formal apology. There's a whole lot of stuff that you can ask for if you find yourself in a tricky situation like that. And you've tried everything and HR simply support them. If HR have not followed due diligence and they've not done the right thing, then there's potentially a case that you can make a claim. You have to decide whether you want to make a claim or not, or if you simply just want to negotiate an exit that's favourable to you, where you feel better and you haven't simply closed the door on that situation. And my pleasure for answering that. Thanks for the message there. We've got time for a couple more questions here. And there are quite a few people here on the call, and also these questions have come through. So what happens, we've done that one there. Can bullying happen through exclusion and information without withholding rather than overt aggression? And absolutely it can. So that's the short answer. It definitely can through exclusion. What I would suggest you do is if you become aware that you are being excluded, let them know. Say, go, hey, look, I noticed that I heard about an email trail and it's been shared with me about XYZ. I'm a part of that program and that body of work. What can we do to make sure that I'm included going forward? Don't even ask them why they excluded you. Assume it was accidental. Maybe you don't really assume it was accidental, but let them think you're assuming them that it was accidental by letting them off the hook by not asking them. And if they say, oh, look, I didn't include you because X, Y, Z, so it makes it really difficult for me to do my job if I'm not at least looped in on the CC list. And as a part of this team, other people are asking why I'm now being excluded. And actually, so am I. Can you explain this? And they go, look, it wasn't, important for you to respond to it. And you go, well, that's what a CC is. Hold them to account. And of course, make note of these situations. And if you're having a verbal conversation, as soon as that conversation's done, write it down so that you remember the verbatims, not the sentiment only. That's what I would encourage you to do. So definitely it can show up through exclusion. Um, oh gosh, this one's interesting, isn't it? What should you do if HR says it's a relationship problem or a communication issue? Then if they say it, ask them for help so that you can understand and resolve in the most proactive and efficient way. And then ask them for their advice on what they would do if they were in the same situation. So never leave it with the statement that's put in front of you. Find out more. I'm a big advocate of asking questions and asking open questions rather than a yes no. Um, so make sure that the other person is being put in a situation where you are going to receive the most amount of information as possible. Um, because it's really easy to push somebody away by going, oh, that's just a communication problem. And then that throws it back at you, and you feel like you're responsible for um, solving it. You go, oh, okay. What do you mean by a communication issue? I just want to understand this better because my absolute intent is to have really positive working relationships. And I've come to you because I'm not understanding it. Maybe I need some help, but I'd love to know your perspective, um, and your tips for doing it. And so include HR in the solving of this problem. It'll make it more difficult for them to avoid or push it back on you in the future. Some people will say to you, oh, so and so's come up through the ranks as a technical expert and now they're a leader, and sometimes technical experts aren't that great at this kind of thing. And that is absolutely true. There is nothing wrong with that. However, when we become leaders, we take on that responsibility to lead. And from a room-wise perspective, being wise to the room and all of the stuff that goes on in the subtext and managing of situations, as a leader, it is your responsibility to step into that space to become a fully rounded leader. If you don't do that, then you're not leading, you're simply managing, and you haven't yet elevated to that level where you are a really good leader. But if you've got a manager who is technically expert and not great at the human interpersonal interrelationship stuff, or communicating, then you also have a job to engage with them in different ways. Um, I had an example with a general manager of HR who I was coaching some time ago. And they came to me for coaching. They said, look, I think I'm going to leave this organization, but here's what's going on. So their chief HR officer, very large organization, um, had a very different style to them. They sensed, they felt, they were never quite able to put their finger on something, but whatever was being presented to them wasn't ever quite right. They couldn't verbalize what that was. They didn't know. And then this person kept having to go away and try and fix it. And stuff that should have been turned around from a program perspective in, say, 4 weeks was taking 3 and 6 months to get over the line because the big boss just didn't feel it was quite right yet. What a nightmare. So we worked on antidotes to that. So we worked on the styles, and we identified the style of the chief HR officer, and we identified the style of the GM. And then we talked about and worked through what those antidotes are to resolving the conflict, because it was feeling like conflict for the GM and frustration and how to manage them. And I gave them some tips, and I said, just treat it like a game, test and learn. Go off and do your test and learn, and let's see what happens and what works. Anyway, they went off and they came back to me the next month, the next coaching session, and they said, oh my gosh, it really works. It works. I did what you suggested, and it was amazing to see the result, but I'm still going to leave because I'm just past that point of no return. But wow, I have learned something about styles and engagement and doing things differently. So always think about your style, think about how you're engaging, find different ways of doing it. Ask questions, more questions. The more you ask, the better your understanding will be, the better the other person's understanding will be of what's not gelling, what's not landing, and you'll get onto a better footing. But there are a whole lot of nuances in there in terms of styles as well, which we don't have time to cover today. But you reach out to me if you've got questions, further questions. How do I deal with the workplace when the management sets up a series of bullying processes, exclude, and I'm assuming this means I'm excluded from the process, heavily scrutinized by a set of managers, like calling my emergency contacts when they could not find me in the building, when they specifically told me to work in the warehouse storage area, refusing to accept my slow step and reduced hours and a medically prescribed return to work. Oh my God, excluded from a promotion, etc. Oh, I'm really sorry you found yourself in that situation. So, and maybe that's a conversation that we could have offline in more detail. Sounds quite complicated. Um, I'd be want to know more about what the scrutinization was by the managers, at what point did they call your emergency contacts, and why were they thinking about doing that? Had you been out of the warehouse or out of the work environment for long or not? Um, um, and what you mean by slow step and reduced hours. So how does that come across? So if you were on a return to work scheme and you were, say, coming back to work, say 2 days a week, they had been advised that you were not in a position to work at full pace, depending on what the reason was, that you'd had an injury, if it was a physical or et cetera, then there are a whole lot of things swirling in my head around that. And I would say, let's talk about that offline so that I can understand your situation better. But it's medically prescribed return to work and then exclusion. I mean, that's complicated. You've thrown quite a lot at me, and I do think it's a fuller discussion for us to have. Um, but yeah, I'm sorry you find yourself in that position. Yeah, I just need more context in order to be able to respond to you in a better way. Um, uh, what if the managers have zero technical skills, and are also a poor manager? Whew. Well, we've got to separate fact from fiction here, and that sounds like it's a pretty intense situation you're finding yourself in. Um, uh, And yes, there is a time limit on the recourse for, sorry, this is the same person asking a series of questions, which is why I'm a bit jolted here. Is there a time limit on recourse of actions on workplace bullying? There is if you leave the organisation, most definitely. It's better to act early than late, most definitely. And if you decide you want to go through the federal court with a workplace issue, there are definitely time limits. And if you're out of an organisation, I think it's a 21-day time limit to lodge a claim through Fair Work. It might be adverse action, workplace bullying, a whole lot of stuff. But yes, so it sounds like you're in a pickle here. Okay, we'll talk offline. Um, okay, okay. I get it. We definitely let's talk offline. And really quickly, can the organisation give lawful direction to a person resigning that they're not permitted to contact the people that remain in the organisation, including the victim? Well, it depends if you're resigning and so if you're resigning and you're going to another organization that's a competitor, there may be grounds to request that you don't contact them. It's like you can't take your client list, even though I know lots of people take their stuff. The reality, but there are actually there can be exclusion times and clauses in employment contracts. So you are best to review your employment contract first. It would depend on how you are being, what the circumstances are for you to be asked not to engage with people, and including the victim. So it sounds like you are being accused of bullying. And when it gets to that point where it looks like legal, if you've also got legal representation, they would also be saying don't engage with people in the organisation, because you're starting to move into an adversarial situation where they need to make it clean. And so, is it advisable to contact people in the organisation? Not after you've left, if you have been accused of bullying yourself. And definitely not the victim. I would say stay well away while processes are being followed, because you don't want to be experiencing something around harassment, etc., etc. You don't want more claims leveled against you, is what I would say to you in that. Um, and we are at time. So if anything has triggered anything for you, um, feel free to contact me offline. If you think that you need help, engage with your EAP within your organisation. That's for psychological support. EAP systems are really quite good. The organisation doesn't know who's been contacting EAP. They just get data in terms of the number of people so they can pay the bills, but they never get the context. So contact EAP if you're finding yourself feeling really stressed and this has triggered anything for you. And as I said, get in touch if you think that I can be of help with your situations, aka our person here maintaining the anonymity. And good luck. This is a topic I feel very strongly about. I feel very strongly for advocating for yourself before it reaches a position of bullying so that the damage can be contained and you can elevate your capability to be room wise and navigate these workplace dynamics in a more eloquent, higher order way, in ways that you didn't know that you could do. So good luck, and I hope you join me for any other sessions I'm running in the future. Bye for now.